If you wanted an open source enterprise search and analytics platform, you deployed Elasticsearch. Until they picked a fight with Amazon. Now Amazon have hit back with OpenSearch, and the choice is no longer clear. Both sides are painting themselves as the defenders of open source, fighting against a big bad corporation. Welcome to the battle for open source search. Revenues. It's a battle for open source search revenues, and everyone else is just caught in the crossfire. Welcome back to the Pro Tech Show. If you've not heard of OpenSearch, it's Amazon's fork of Elasticsearch, but why does it even exist? Elasticsearch is, or was, open source, more on that later. That meant anyone could download the code, modify it, and create their own services based on it. Amazon did this. They took the code and built a service called Amazon Elasticsearch Service, and sold it on their dominant Amazon Web Services cloud platform. Elastic, the company behind Elasticsearch, are a commercial entity. One of their sources of revenue is Elastic Cloud, a managed cloud platform that provides Elasticsearch as a service. Elastic Cloud can be deployed on Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud Platform, or Amazon Web Services. You've probably spotted where this one is going. Put yourself in Elastic shoes. They develop a very popular piece of software and they start selling it as a managed service on AWS. Amazon copies their code and brings out their own AWS service that directly competes with Elastic using Elastic's own software. Because Amazon own AWS, they can undercut Elastic on price, and now Elastic find themselves competing with the biggest cloud vendor in the world, using their own code and at a price they can't possibly match. It's plain dirty, but it's completely legal because the code is open source. Elastic software is available on Azure and Google as well, but they've entered into a licensing agreement with Elastic. Amazon haven't. So Elastic spoke to Amazon and said, "Hey, this isn't cool. You're making like $100 million a year or more from our product, and you're not contributing. All the other guys are paying a licensing fee, so why don't you do the same?" To which I assume Amazon said, "Go away, peasant. We're planning our holiday into space. Thanks for funding it." Now, Amazon did make a couple of mistakes here. Whilst it is true that Elasticsearch was open source, that doesn't give Amazon the right to use Elastic's trademarks. They can download the code, sure. They can build it and sell it as a service, sure. They can't call it Elasticsearch though, because that's a registered trademark. So not only were they using Elastic's code, they were effectively stealing their name and potentially misleading customers in the process. As far as Elastic was concerned, it was simple trademark infringement, so they sent in the lawyers. Amazon's other mistake was the inclusion of proprietary code in their open distro for Elasticsearch. Ironically, the open distro for Elasticsearch was Amazon's attempt at avoiding just that. Whilst the base Elasticsearch was free and open source, Elastic muddied the waters by selling non-free features on top. Open distro for Elasticsearch was Amazon's attempt at separating out the free and reusable components from the parts that required a license. It was a separate copy of Elasticsearch code with the paid stuff removed, and a few gaps plugged. For example, if you wanted authentication, that used to be a paid feature, so Amazon added their own. This was useful for third parties, but especially useful for Amazon themselves, so they could build their own service from this and avoid any legal shenanigans. At least until some non-free bits popped up in the open distro and they got in trouble. But the fact that this could even happen by mistake did actually underscore the reason behind doing it in the first place. One thing Amazon were very clear about though, is that this was not a fork. They had no intention of forking Elasticsearch. So why did they? Unsurprisingly, Elastic weren't very happy about Amazon's behaviour. This feeds into a bit of a larger narrative. There's a growing discontent that huge corporations like Amazon are taking open source code that other people have contributed for free, and they're making billions of dollars from that unpaid work. In Amazon's case, tens of billions of dollars annually. Open source is meant to be collaborative, give and take. Not everyone is a developer who can contribute code, but just by using it and providing feedback, you're helping. The feeling is that if you're using it to generate tens of billions of dollars of revenue off the back of other people's work, your contribution should be a little more on the significant side though. Elastic clearly feel this way, however not all open source contributors do. Many project owners are happy for their work to be picked up and used at this kind of scale. For some, they're just happy to see their work being recognised and to know they've had a significant impact. Those people didn't write the code with the intention of profiting from it though, and this is where Elastic differs. With Amazon unwilling to budge and unfazed by Elastic's legal action for trademark infringement, Elastic took a step further. They changed the licensing used for their software. The source code is still freely available. you can still use it, but it no longer meets the definition of open source. The big difference is that it is now conditional. You can use Elasticsearch for free as long as you don't cross certain lines. If this matters to you, you should read it in more detail, but the bottom line is this: you can use it for free as long as you're not competing with Elastic themselves. More specifically, you cannot provide it as a managed service unless you pay a licensing fee. This doesn't mean you can't build a product using Elastic Stack and offer it as a managed service. If your product uses Elasticsearch to manage data and visualizes information using Kibana, and you provide it as a managed service, that's fine. If your product allows your customer to build their own data analytics and visualizations using Elasticsearch and Kibana, then that's not okay, because your product is in fact Elasticsearch and Kibana. You need a license. This is very clearly and openly designed to specifically target Amazon, whilst avoiding any impact to the vast majority of Elastic's users. According to Elastic, they are taking a stand to protect open source from the big bad corporation. It's a clear message to Amazon that they need to pay up or start maintaining their own code from now on. Amazon, unsurprisingly, decided they like money far too much to pay, so they forked the code and now maintain their own copy. Having already been on the receiving end of a legal slap for trademark infringement, they've rebranded their service from Amazon Elasticsearch to OpenSearch. Amazon have made OpenSearch's code available as an open source project, and are attempting to win over Elastic's community, many of whom are quite upset with Elastic for changing the license. But wait, why are they upset? Aren't Elastic trying to protect the little guy? Maybe that's a motivation, but they're also clearly motivated to protect the revenue stream, and some of the little guys have been crushed underfoot in the process. As targeted as the license wording may have been, it's still a pretty blunt instrument. Less a surgical strike and more like carpet bombing. A number of small providers who don't have the resources of Amazon, and who weren't trying to undercut Elastic and steal their customers, have been caught in the middle. Their use of the service matches the licensing criteria that means they need to pay, and suddenly having unexpected fees thrust upon you because the open source software you built your business on is no longer open source, that's a problem. Other people are mad because they contributed code in good faith to an open source project, and now Elastic have changed the rules, and may in some cases actually be charging the author to use the very code that they contributed to Elastic for free. This move has damaged trust in Elastic as a company. The worry for many is that if they've moved the goalposts this time to take a shot at Amazon, they might do it again in the future. One of the principles of open source is that anyone can do whatever they want with the code. Once it's open sourced, it effectively belongs to everyone. Elastic say all the right things about supporting open source, but their actions imply that support is contingent on it remaining profitable for them to do so. If it's not, they might change the rules. The concern people now have is that if they'll move the goalposts to go after Amazon, where exactly is the line? If their revenue drops too low, will they adjust the license terms again in some kind of attempted shakedown of their user base? Amazon are of course happy to capitalise on this. Come to OpenSearch! Elastic has turned their back on open source. Amazon want OpenSearch to take Elasticsearch's place as the new standard for open source enterprise search. Much like Elastic, they're presenting themselves as the people who are defending open source from the big bad corporation. Much like with Elastic, it's difficult to separate that from the obvious ulterior motive of protecting their revenue. Amazon don't have Elastic to maintain their software for them anymore, so they're having to do it themselves. Of course they want to attract the community away from Elasticsearch and over to OpenSearch, because then the community can help maintain Amazon's software for them for free. I mean, call me cynical, but if Amazon really wanted to do something for the benefit of the community, they could simply pay their fair share of taxes. There is a final twist to this tale. The licensing terms I've made reference to are part of the Elastic V2 license. But when Elastic made their change to Elasticsearch's licensing, they actually dual licensed it. If you download the pre-compiled binaries, it's under the Elastic V2 license. However, you can download the source code under either Elastic V2 or the server-side public license, the SSPL. This one has no restrictions on use. You can use it in its entirety and you don't need to pay. Amazon could rebuild Elasticsearch's current code as OpenSearch and use it without limitation and without needing to pay Elastic a penny if they chose the SSPL license. They're not going to do that, and I don't believe Elastic ever thought they would. In fact, I suspect Elastic have provided this option in part as a counter to Amazon's claim that they care about free software more than Elastic does. This is Elastic's way of calling Amazon out on that. The SSPL is a copyleft license. This means it's completely free to use, but it does come with a catch. If you use SPL license code to provide a service, it's free. But you must release the entirety of the code for that service for free under the SSPL as well. That includes management, automation, hosting, backup software, anything used to deliver and run the service. In other words, Amazon can use it, and they wouldn't have to pay Elastic a penny, but they would have to open up pretty much the entirety of Amazon Web Services source code and give it to the community. You like sharing source code, Amazon? Okay, here's ours. Now you show everyone yours. Give and take, right? At least that's how I see this. Unsurprisingly, Amazon aren't going to give up their competitive advantage, so they're just forking the old version of Elasticsearch instead. So, Elasticsearch, OpenSearch, they share the same lineage, but which one should you choose? Assuming you don't care about picking sides between warring corporations, then what it comes down to is this. Elasticsearch is the latest and greatest with the most up-to-date features. OpenSearch is based on an older version and lags behind Elasticsearch in terms of features, but it has a less restrictive license that properly meets the definition of open source, rather than Elastic's free and open alternative. That's really it in a nutshell. Comment below and let me know what you think and which side you find yourself agreeing with. I'll link to both of them in the description, but don't you worry about searching for your next video because it's right here. If this was useful, then hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel is always appreciated. I'll see you in the next video, which really ought to be this one. Go on, click it before it disappears.